We're fine, thank you so much. Now, let me introduce you, and we can start with the presentation. Okay, it's my pleasure to introduce Augusto Carvalho. Augusto is a quantitative solution engineer at IonQ, where he is exploring how quantum technology can tackle real-world challenges in the financial industry. With over 2 decades of experience in quantitative finance, especially around derivatives modeling, he worked with a wide array of key industry sectors, like credit card, derivatives exchange, banking, risk analytics vendor, and lecturing both grad and undergrad levels. Augusto's journey includes hands-on roles at investment banks such as Unicredit in Italy and BNP Paribas in Brazil. Mobile payment starters derivatives exchange B3, where he also served as a lecturer and contributed for R&D product team. His expertise in advanced analytics was further solidified to significant positions at industry leaders like SAS and Numerix, where he rose to VP for Latin America, specializing in enterprise banking and hedge fund solutions for derivatives pricing and risk. With a master in physics and specialized in master complex systems applied to financial risk management, Augusto now challenges extensive industry and academic knowledge to bridge the gap between complex financial challenges and quantum technology. His talk today is titled IonQ's Quantum Platform, When Quantum Means Finance. Thanks so much for joining us, Augusto. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Wilmer. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning, good evening. For those who are not in the same time zone, my name is Augusto Carvalho. Wilmer, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm super excited to join you here online and share some of my thoughts on the application of quantum computing to financial industry. Okay, so my background, as you mentioned, I'm a physicist, but I have been working on the financial industry since my master. I did a master in quantum physics, and then I started working directly with financial applications like derivative modeling, and now I'm coming back to like the world of quantum now as a physicist, so it's quite exciting. Let me show here just to make sure. I guess everyone can see the screen here, right? With the agenda, Wilmer, just to confirm.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, so this is supposed to be a very interactive conversation. So feel free to make questions during my chat. The way that I'm thinking about here about the agenda, I want to talk a little bit about the reason why people have been now looking at quantum from within the financial industry, right? And I'll go through how the history of the company here is also making sense with respect to the types of problems that we can now address. That's where I'm going to talk about the quantum computing with ions, right? And then we're going to jump right into the financial application and some final notes. And let me start with the why now, why quantum now. I would guess that most of you here might have a pretty good idea of the reason why we're having this discussion, we're having this presentation, right? Why quantum now? And I'd say that the conversation might be broken in two sides. One side, if you think about the academics, right? Quantum computing has been talked about, not like at least theoretically, since the 80s. But from a market perspective, from an industry perspective, I'd say that people start really pay attention because of some of the threats, as everyone here might know, in terms of like cybersecurity, right? So if you look at the way that people have been talking about cybersecurity, especially around cryptography, that would be the main driver. That might be the main topic for which, let's say, banks, insurance company, health organization have been start to get concerned. And so I would say that this might have been the very main driver of this conversation that we're having now, right? And the second reason here is it really comes along with the technology, with how the technology has evolved, and we're now getting to a point where we're getting very close to what people in the industry consider as the simulation threshold, right? The idea is that we're able to simulate what the quantum computer can do up to around like roughly 50 high quality qubits, which means that now we're also very close to start entering into an era of quantum computing in which we'll probably not be able to run the simulations classically to test the results, right? So this way you can think about the real problems that are big in nature, that are really challenging for the classical computing. Now we're getting, the way to address those problems are getting closer and closer. And I will give strong examples of real application in finance towards this presentation, given the computing power that we already have. Okay. And of course, as the technology evolved, we're start like seeing that the computer is not only ready to be like from hardware perspective, the quantum computer now is not only available, but now you can start creating applications and start creating smart ways of doing integration with the classical computation. And by classical here, I mean both classical computing, the PCs, but also all the GPUs that companies have now access through either the cloud or on-site data centers, right? And the fourth interesting reason why we should be talking about this new paradigm in terms of computing, is the fact that it will take for any company that decides I want you to do quantum, I want you to be prepared. It might take like around 2 years to, like, let's say, start building a team, right? Getting the knowledge to apply the algorithms, understanding how the data flows between classical and quantum, how to do the mappings. So all of that takes time. So if you decide now, you're already like thinking at least a 2 years, time window, looking ahead to start getting the benefits of this wave, if you will, right? So those are the four main drives that I consider, and the company also considers as main drivers for us to have this conversation. And here again, I'm going to talk briefly about what is the platform that we're using to apply, to tackle, to address those problems. And then we're going to make the link with the size of some of those problems that the industry knows about. Okay. I'm going to stop just for a minute here, just in case anyone has any questions so far. Otherwise, I will just move to the next section. Okay. So, although the conversation is about quantum computing, we have been positioning ourselves as a quantum platform. So it doesn't. Quantum computing is just one part of these entire industry, which is really relevant. But we're also ready, and we're also working on specifically like problems that quantum networks can address, right? When you think about cybersecurity, those are very, very straightforward application in which you can address by providing quantum network technology, right? And that will not only guarantee that let's say the banks, the insurance companies, the health industry, it can be applied to any industry. They will not only have the ability to keep their data safe, because now you might switch to like a quantum safe type of cryptography era, right? But you're also going to be able to make quantum computers to talk to each other. If you think about a quantum network of quantum computers, right? And the third one is the quantum sensing, which basically use quantum, very established like quantum technology to make very sensitive like assessments about like how gravitational field, for example, changed according to the position where you're monitoring or surveying, right? And that of course has many applications around like mining, oil industry. But today the focus will be on one of these three boxes here, three engines here, quantum computing, and we're going to use that part to address some of the financial application that the market has been looking at. Okay, so in terms of history, now we'll start talking about the technology, right? We can go back here to 1995. One of the co-founders of IonQ first demonstrated like a quantum logic gate, and to many people this is considered the birth of the quantum computing in terms of like really out of the theoretical realm. And then since 19, the company has evolved and creating really like real quantum machine, quantum computing, all the way through the 2020s, where the quantum computers from IonQ start being available through the cloud, right? Through the three main cloud providers. After that, we also came to apply some of the algorithms, some of the quantum algorithms to solve and to test real problems from different industries. Okay, the focus here will be in finance, but as you can imagine, as you probably have seen in other presentations, the potential problems are everywhere. You can find problems that quantum computer can help solving within health, insurance, right? Banking industry, insurance, like material science, right? Chemistry, pharma. So all of that, all of those industries have their own potential application, and we have been developing that at the company, at IonQ. With respect to how we were able to give access, right, to the players, if you're thinking here about the banks, insurance companies. So IonQ has provide not only the access through the cloud, as I mentioned in the previous slide, but we also deploy, we sell those machines for the companies. And especially now, sovereignty has been a big issue worldwide, and for some industries and for some companies, it makes sense to like have their own quantum computers, right, where they can have their own data and full capacity in terms of like access, right? And here just some of the names of the quantum computers that the company has been offering to the market, since Harmony all the way to the current Temple system, and now we're working with quantum computers with like 64 to 100 qubits, right, and many more as the technology evolves for the next 5 years within the company. And I will comment a little bit about that in the next slides. Okay. Now let me switch to the technology that we use at IonQ to run the quantum computers. That's one of the main technology of quantum computers. It's called trapped ion quantum computers, right? The idea is you basically create like a trap that use both like alternating and electromagnetic fields to keep the atom like static, not static because it moves a little bit, but in this tiny suspension, just above the circuit that we see here. The good thing about using the ions as your main as your qubits in this type of quantum computation, right, is the fact that they're identical. So there's no error in terms of like fabricating, qubits. So they are naturally they're naturally very the same. They're pretty much the same. There's no difference between those ions, and they have longer coherence time. The technology also provides like universal set of gates. And I will talk a little bit about how we're going to see scaling, the scaling of these technology, and of course the world record of 2 gates fidelity here that this technology has provided. Okay, just to give you like a sense of the size, this is the chip of the Temple. The Forte quantum computer that I talked about here, the 36 qubits. In the center of this chip here, that's where the trap lives. That's where those ions will be suspended, and on the right side is just to give an idea of scale of that size. Okay, and one thing that I'd like to comment is what we are seeing in terms of like the roadmap, what is the goal, and the reason why we're going to be able to provide that. So if you think about like from 2025, we're already like talking about 64 to 100 qubits plus, right? That's already being discussed. That this has already been presented in some of the public presentation from the company, and they were already like looking ahead to going like towards 256. And in one of the financial applications, I'm going to comment about this number 256. It's a very interesting turning point, and that will and the roadmap here is pointed to 2 million qubits by 2030, and 80,000 qubits, logical qubits, the high quality qubits that can be used really for running those algorithms. And all of these can be found also at IonQ's website. So I'd like to explain how we think about these ability to scale, right? So first of all, if you come back to this slide here, the way that the ion trap works in a quantum computer is that those ions, they are suspended, right? They are on this trap. They cannot leave that that line that you see here. But what we do is we control the states. The concept of gates here, it's basically using lasers to individually address each of those qubits. Okay, meaning that you literally point the lasers right to the different qubits that you want to apply. The single qubit gates or 2 qubit gates. That's where we're going to use the lasers. And but if you think about the scaling, right? If you think about going from 36 qubits all the way to thousands of qubits, then you think also, okay, how the whole machinery of lasers can handle that growth, right? Can you imagine having, hundreds of thousands or millions of qubits, but also having like millions of laser beams pointing to different qubits on the computer? So that's the scaling problem that these technology, when using the lasers to perform the gates operation, that's where we see like a big problem for scaling, and that's the reason why we're gonna be switching to these new technology, new chip technology here. So we're gonna still use lasers to prepare the states of the quantum computers, but the control is not going to be achieved via lasers anymore. The control will be achieved basically on a quantum, electronic circuit. So here, the size, just to give an idea, this is like 80 qubits, chip from Oxford Ionics, which is a company that's now part of IonQ. And the idea is really to scale as you go from what we call a unit cell, which contains like 2 qubits, being able to go all the way through 256, and then we basically, copy and paste those circuits to like let's call like a board, if you will, or a bigger circuit. I'm gonna leave here a very nice reference that explained how we're able to work with like 1,000 qubits. In some of the technologies, like quantum computer technologies, the problem really arises as you put like so many wires to address the control of the different qubits on the chip, right? So here it's where we are able to make that transition in terms of scalability. And just to give an idea of size, that's the size of the chip. So the ions are still there. There's still a trap, but that's really tiny as compared to the whole chip that you see here. And one of the astounding results of that technology is that we now have the world record of 2 qubit gate fidelity, which of course allow us to start going really deep in terms of like circuits and tackling more realistic problems in the industry. And now I'm gonna start talking about the applications in finance. I'm going to stop for a second just in case there's any question. Vilmar, I'm not sure if you're the one checking for a question and if you want to ask, or should I look at here the chat? How do you want to do it? Okay, it looks like there's no question here. Let's start talking about the applications in finance. Okay, so let me start with what I consider the canonical example of quantum computing applied to finance. That's what we call the portfolio optimization, right? That's the number one problem that everyone talks about whenever you look for potential applications into finance. And the problem is basically stated like this. You have potential assets. Think about the potential stocks that an investor can choose from in the market, right? And then you need to choose N stocks in such a way that that portfolio that you're building has the minimal risk and the higher return. Okay, so you're going to make more money with that portfolio with the least amount of risk. And in finance, the hedge funds, the portfolio managers, they deal with this relationship between those two measures, right? And there are many ways to combine those two measures, like minimizing risk at the same time that you optimize the return. So in terms of optimization, this is a binary optimization, the way that we state this problem. By binary, we just mean that you can choose different stocks. Either you put a stock on your portfolio or you don't, 0 or 1, right? So that's how you state this optimization problem. You say, okay, I want to minimize the risk, subject to having like the greatest combined return for each of the stocks that you choose, and also constraints subject to a certain number of stocks that you might be able to address, either because you have like a limited amount of money, right? So that's what people call the cardinality, okay? And the variable that we're optimizing here is binary. Either you have the stocks or stock or you don't have it. Why this problem is a canonical problem in optimization when talking about quantum, and the reason is very simple. The size of the problem, the number of possible combinations of stocks, you know, it grows really fast. It's combinatorial. Just to give you like an idea about the number, how big those numbers are. If you think about 270 stocks, okay, think about the S&P 500, for example. Though the index tracks 500 stocks, but if you're looking at 270 potential stocks to choose from, the number here of possible like combinations, it's already like crossing the threshold of the estimated number of atoms in the universe. I'm going to pause for a second because this is really strong. I hope you can all can grasp how big the number is. Okay, so if you're crossing 270 stocks, then we have already surpassed the number of like atoms in the universe with respect to the number of combinations, potential combinations from which we can create the portfolio from. Okay, and once you define the problem, then you basically transform this in a way that in a cost function, in this case, 3 simple components: risk, return, and a third component is just to make sure that, okay, I want to have no more than 20 stocks or 50 stocks, right? And you add a penalty on that. And an example of a solution would be this X that you see here. So in this case, I would choose like stocks 2, 5, and 7, right? As one solution, as an example. Okay, the problem with this application is that this is a binary optimization problem. But in real life, in banks, in hedge funds, you don't really deal only with binary. You also deal with combinations of binary and continuous optimization problems, right? You need to know, okay, I want to buy 30% of certain stock and 7% of another stock, right? And then you need to add so many more realistic constraints. The ones that I'm showing here, they're really simple, just the number of stocks, risk, and return. But you need to consider things like how much it costs to make a transaction in the market. If I need to like keep rebalancing my portfolio, right? What if I need to make those to optimize the portfolio, given that I want that my risk to be within a certain level, given, let's say, a VAR number that the banks use when look at those portfolios. So you have so many realistic, really hard constraints that make this problem really, really, really important. And so that's just what I'm calling here the canonical example of application in finance. I'm going to show now other applications in finance that are very, very realistic and can be addressed already quantum computing power that we have currently. Okay, so those are realistic applications. The number one here is what we call the quantum cupola. And the idea is, if you're working on a bank at the risk management or the treasury department or the front office of the bank, or if you're working on a hedge fund, you need to make simulations about the assets that you trade on a daily basis. Okay, and traditionally, what banks, insurance have been doing with those with this simulation is doing, as you all know, Monte Carlo. Maybe for those who don't know the concept of Monte Carlo, you assume that the behavior of your asset, your stock, has two components. One component is deterministic. It's basically the equivalent of like the money that you can leave on a banking account. And the second component, which is random, right? It's completely random. So when you combine those two components, you get a simulation that really seems to be more realistic in terms of like how the market really behaves. And then you can use this Monte Carlo to generate the simulation. The problem is those stocks, those foreign currencies, commodities, it doesn't matter the asset class that you're dealing with, they have correlation. So you cannot simply just simulate each of those risk factors, we call risk factors. You cannot just simulate independently. You need somehow to consider also how they are correlated with each other. And a traditional way of doing this is through the concept of cupola. It's a statistical method in which you can transform those historical distributions, and you also need to make assumptions about how those stocks they correlate with each other, and then you run the Monte Carlo. That's the traditional way of doing it. And here's this is from a study that we did at IonQ a couple of years ago with just four stocks. The codes here are codes of stocks in the market. And each square that you see here in this graph, it's basically on the diagonal is the histogram of the daily returns, right? If you get the price, you convert to returns like the price increased like 1% from yesterday to today. So you keep the time series of the returns, and the non-diagonal squares that you see here are scatter plots between two different stocks, right? For example, VIX against Dow Jones index, for example, and you see there's a negative correlation between them. But you could easily extend the analysis to like 100 stocks or commodities or credit products. It doesn't really matter. So we were able to create a quantum cupola approach that basically learn about the correlation between the assets. This is really strong because you have a correlation parametric free assumption. You don't need to make any assumption about how those assets are correlated with each other. Okay, and we're able to demonstrate on the left side is basically a transformation from those returns that I showed in the previous slide into like a cumulative distributions, and that's where the cupola really starts. And on the right side is the comparison on how the quantum algorithm learned about the relationship, about the correlation of those assets as you increase, the steps. So you can see, for example, the convergence, to this metric KL, really went down as we increase the number of steps, and the shape is pretty much the same when you compute the learning on a simulator, on a quantum computer simulator, as compared to a real quantum computer. Okay, and we're already like expanding these analysis to multiple risk factors. So it's very exciting. And just to give an idea about what does it mean in terms of like quantum computing, like quantum circuits, what we're talking about here, we're basically representing each risk factor. We're representing as we call a bit string. So like three bits will will represent one stock. Okay, and then we are able to entangle those qubits. And as you can imagine, the entanglement here is the artifact that we use to learn about the correlation between those assets, right? And of course, there are many like rotations in the middle, right, in different like directions from the qubits. But the idea is that it's an interactive like process. We try some rotations, and then okay, if that distribution is not close enough to the real distribution, then we change a little bit. So the circuit is learning about the correlation structure. Okay, and here's the reference of the paper. Very, very interesting, super exciting, and we can already apply these technology. And we use this concept of quantum circuit born machine, okay, which is an idea that you can play with these rotations and entanglement to learn about how the data is related. Okay, you could use also like to generate data, if you will. Okay, another application is quantum hybrid LLM fine tuning. The idea here is also another work that was done by IonQ research team and application team, in which we were able to show that it is possible to use the quantum computing to fine-tuning a large language model. And by fine-tuning here, for those who are working within the AI arena, during the fine-tuning, you don't really recalibrate the entire model, right? You transfer the learning of a larger model that you might have. It can be, that's what we call a foundational model, right? And then you use your own data. It could be your proprietary data, right? If you're a bank, you're talking about like reports that you might have, perspectives that you might have written for your clients. Insurance company, they would have like claims that they receive from their clients. So you can use all of this to fine-tune your large language model. And we were able to show an improvement on the accuracy. Okay, and we varied here like from 10 to 18 qubits, but also we did an estimate in terms of energy consumption from 35 qubits to 49, and the outstanding result here. Not only we were able to increase the accuracy as compared to classical machine learning models for classification machine learning models, right? So not only we're able to increase that, but we also showed that the consumption of energy, as we grow the number of qubits, doesn't explode. Okay, again, I'm going to stop for a second because this is a very important result, especially if you're looking at the whole discussion about like energy consumption, constructions of energy, companies buy like nuclear plants to be able to keep up with the energy consumption that those data centers require, especially with large language models as they keep growing in terms of like the number of parameters. Okay, so I think the main message here in this slide is the crossover point is 46 qubits. That's where we can say, look, from this point on, we're gonna require way less energy to fine-tune large language models. So very exciting. very promising, especially with the concern about, energy consumption, environmental change. That's a very, very strong result, and we do believe that quantum has a place, has a role to play on that matter. The last application that I want to talk about, it's something that comes from the realm of mathematics, the subject called topology, and the idea is that data has shape. It doesn't matter what type of data. We might be talking about like time series. We might be talking about like features that a bank might have when looking at anti-fraud solutions, right? They might have information about the credit. They might have not. They have information about the credit card. Where are you buying something, right? What time? The amount that you're purchasing, right? Your demographics. All of that information is data, and this information can be analyzed in terms of in terms of their shape. That's the focus of this methodology called topological data analysis, which basically allows you to see how the shape of the data behaves as you change some of the parameters, because if the data is changing, and I will explain what the change really means, it can be the case that either the market's moving is changing somehow, so you need to take an action, either enter into the market or exit the market, or you might be looking at anti-fraud solution. If the shape of the data of a client is changing, it might be a red alert, and then you can take the actions, okay? And I will explain very briefly here some of the results that we were able to find. I will explain, in this graph, you have the H1s all the way to H4. Those are some of the measures of the shape that I will talk about, as compared to time series of S&P 500. And we were able to see that higher orders of that measure of the shape have a strong correlation with time series. This is one potential application, which we called early warning predictive modeling, okay? Which is basically the ability to tell you if there's an imminent change in the market that you might be interested in, and you can take the action. So it's just one potential application, okay? And I'm gonna go through a really quick way of preparing the data so you can run the topological analysis, okay? I'm gonna use here as an example, like three time series of price. So imagine that you have the price, Microsoft, Banorte, and Petrobras in Brazil, and then you transform this price in returns. That's how you start making the transformation. That's the bottom graph that you see here. And the blue shade you see here, that's a time window. I'm choosing here like a 3-month time window. It means that that's going to be my first data, the first set of data that I'm going to analyze. That's called the point cloud, okay? And then we can keep moving the time window and creating more point clouds. And I'm going to show what this point cloud means. If you look at just as a 2-dimensional problem, just 2 stocks, okay? That's the left graph you see here. That's a point cloud, is a 2-dimensional point cloud. However, in real applications, you might have like many dimensions. If you look at time series, you might have like 20, 50, 100, doesn't matter. The dimensionality that exists in the real market can be really high. It doesn't matter. You can always transform that dimensionality into distances, okay? So in this case, on the right side, that's what we're doing here. We're basically, for each point from that cloud, we're computing the Euclidean distance to every other point from the point cloud, right? That's why you see on the diagonal here, sorry, the anti-diagonal, everything it's yellow here. So it's a sort of it's similar to how you would look at correlation heat map, but in this case, what you're measuring is the distance between those 2 points. Okay, and from this point, you can start working with the quantum algorithm for TTA, and I will explain what does it mean. What you do basically, for each point, you draw like a circle, the certain radius. Okay. And you keep increasing this radius. Whenever 2 radius like intersect, you create an edge between those 2 points. Okay? As you can see, those point clouds now start forming some sort of network, right? But they are closely related to the concept of topology in mathematics, right? How these networks, how the shape, how do you see the shape of those networks? Not only the shapes, but also the holes, right? If I increase a little bit the circle, I can have more, intersections, more and more intersections. But you see that here I had like 3 holes. Now I have 1 hole. What the quantum will do here is counting the number of holes in higher dimensions. Okay, that's the power of the quantum computing applied to this problem. As we grow with the number of dimensions, counting the holes becomes really, really hard. Here I'm just showing like a 2D hole, right? But you have like holes in higher dimension, right? And that's where the complexity here lives. If you think about a generic like n vertices networks, if you want to compute the number of we call this k simplexes. K is the dimension, okay, 0, 1, 2. As you grow the number of as you grow the dimension, the number of potential simplexes grows really fast, really fast, and that's where we start like having the typical combinatorial problem to tackle. As a final note, although we're talking here about some of the applications, within the financial industry, classical will be always the quantum's buddy, right? Like you're gonna always have like a hybrid workflow, and by hybrid I mean you might have like a commercial application that use some part of the calculation of the learning on the classical side. Some part of that application will go to a quantum computer, and vice versa. There will be this workflow, this combination, this like this combination of tasks or jobs being done by typical classical computer, CPU and GPU, but also with quantum. Okay, so here just a pictorial version of what that workflow would look like, right? You have your commercial application, you have a decision engine, and you need to perform some calculation to make decisions. Part of that calculation can be routed towards the quantum computing. And there might be actually, also back and forth between the quantum and the classical. That's the example that I'm showing here in gray. Okay, if you think about how you're getting the data you're going to use, you're certainly going to need to do data compression because of the number of qubits, right? That you have might not be enough to tackle the size of the problem that you want. And then you need to work on data encoding. How do you map the data that you have into a way that a qubit, can represent in a quantum computer? Then you're going to write the program, you're going to compile, You probably want to do the classical simulator before working with the real quantum. But then here, that's the gray is that when you make the bridge between that classical part of your workflow with the quantum part of the workflow. And you might have the communication that I was talking about between the quantum and classical as you're like running some sort of optimization loop with respect to the parameters that you want to find. And in the end, you can use the classification as an example here for machine learning, and then you can use the classification task classically. Okay. That's it. I hope you have some good questions. Let's go.
Okay. Thank you so much, Augusto, for such an insightful presentation. Let's now move on to the question. So Carmen is asking for, what is finance due to move from traditional finance into quantum technology?
Yeah. Well, can you say again? I'm looking at the chat. Was looking at the question. Is the first question for Carmen?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what inspired me to do the move? First of all, I'm a physicist, so the spark has always been there, right? Although I haven't worked as a physicist on a lab or at a university, I've been working within the financial industry for the last 25 years. But the spark was always there. And at some point, probably for the last 2 years, I started really getting involved, reading a lot, educating myself, and I realized that we were getting to a point where the applications will be really real given the evolution of the technology. So that's what really sparked my interest to make the move, and I was fortunate enough to join IonQ with that journey, and I will be focusing on the financial application. So that's where I'm making the transition, worth, right? Because I'm bringing some of the experience that I have, but now with the perspective of the quantum computing, like ability, capacity of tackle those problems.
Nice. Another question from Carmen is, could you please share if IonQ currently offers internships or research collaboration for students interested in quantum finance?
Yes, I will. I suggest you to take a look at the company's website on the careers section. We do have like partnership with also universities that also can use IonQ's like quantum computers for the research. Yes, we can offer that.
Nice. Another question from Abigail says, how does IonQ's quantum platform specifically address challenges in financial industry, such as derivatives pricing or risk management?
Perfect. That's a great question. And in fact, that is really the heart of my experience. I have specialized in derivatives pricing, derivative modeling. And I guess that the best application here is those derivatives where you have like a high number of dimensions, right? When you start pricing derivatives that have more than four or more risk factors, you think about like an option based on a basket, including many stocks. Like from 4 up, it's already better to use Monte Carlo as compared to any other, let's say, analytical method to price those derivatives. The problem is that the Monte Carlo, the convergence of the classical Monte Carlo is really slow, and it goes with the square of the number, 1 over the square of the number of simulations that you need to do, right? So if you need to double your accuracy of the price of that derivative, you need actually to increase the number of simulations by 4. Okay, and we're talking here about like simulations in the order of like 10,000, 20,000, or even more, depending on the number of dimensions. So that's where we can think about like the Monte Carlo application via quantum. There is a theoretical speed up, and by speed up I mean there is a theoretical advantage of using quantum. So your accuracy, instead of going as 1 over the square root of n, actually it goes as a 1 over n, meaning that if you do Monte Carlo in quantum, if you want to double your precision, you just double the number of simulation. Or you can do, it's a trade-off. You can also, if you want to keep the same accuracy that you have, actually you can reduce the number of simulations, right? So you can play with this trade-off. And there have been discussions on already like applying those, the quantum Monte Carlo specifically for these problems internally. Okay, so I think it's very promising, and derivative, I would say it's going to be the very first applications of but when having the quantum Monte Carlo methods.
Cool. The next question is, how has your background in economic physics and complex system influenced the way you approach quantum financial applications?
Got it. Yeah, great question. So when I did, it's funny because when I did like economic physics, I was already like very interested about like financial markets, and at the time, it was 2002. Yeah, 2002 was when I started. There were already like many physicists working in the financial industry, so that caught my attention, especially abroad. Not that much in I'm from Brazil, but at that time there were not so many like physicists working in the financial markets. But I knew that in like abroad, and that's why when I went to Italy for my second master, I ended up like working in an investment bank in Italy, where we were doing model validation for credit derivatives. If you recall, for those who recall 2008 as a financial crisis, one of the main products, financial products that were considered like the drivers of some of the, at least partially for the collapse, was the credit derivatives, and I was doing like model validation for that. And I recall we had like, I think the team there at the model validation in the bank was around like 10 people at the time. Like 8 of them were physicists. My boss was a particle physicist. Another manager, he was like doing like quantum research at the university. So then I realized that actually there could be many applications, from physicists like myself at the time, where I could get my, the knowledge that I got from the university, from the master, and then apply to real life problems within the financial market. So that was the influence. And I was already doing my master. I was already applying to using like methods from statistical physics applied to pricing derivatives, okay, using alternative methods. So that's how I made the connection.
Cool. Now another question for Abigail are what are the main challenges when translating academic quantum algorithms into practical tools for banks and financial institutions? Also, she asked, which quantum software and hardware tools are currently most effective for tackling finance-related problems?
Got it. Yeah, so I'd say that the biggest challenge, it's always, and this is not only for quantum, okay? I have also a sound experience within the software industry for banks and hedge funds. Data, like bringing data to the application that you want to apply, right? In this case, with quantum, it's a little bit tricky because you need to do data mapping. Qubits are not the same as bits, right? The way that you map the information in a quantum computer is not the same as you map in a classical computer. So there's always this mapping process that you need to work on, and that's part of the challenge, right? In terms of software, the industry, of course, we have Qiskit, right, as the biggest open source programming language to tackle that integration between classical and quantum. So I don't think that the tool is a problem per se, because the tools are available, and of course creating applications. I'd say it's going to be the next wave. Really, if you think about the way that we had software, right? We're still not there, but we are able to make the mappings, right? If you think about the portfolio optimization that I was talking about, it's basically, what are the stocks that you're talking about, right? What are the price? Where is the risk? How do I get that information? How do I map to qubits? And by the way, there's not only one way to map the information into a quantum computing. Different problems will require different ways of doing the mapping. So I'd say definitely that the mapping might be a challenge. And also like volume of data. Okay, initially, you might not really need to work with quantum with like big data, right? If you look at, for example, the paper that we did for LLM fine-tuning, we were able already to provide like a very increasing the accuracy of the model with a small amount of data. So that's another way that quantum is also seems to be very promising. You can get a very good insights without having to use the big data. And so definitely the mapping. And I could list here a ton of applications and algorithms. I'm not touching upon the algorithms that are used to solve those problems. Rather, I decide to make the presentation more like, what are the problems that the banks and insurers are looking at currently. And with respect to the hardware, that's where the partnership will really yield, right, for clients. The hardware here, there are basically four types, right, of quantum computing technology. Each of them with pros and cons, but the hardware per se, it's not really an issue here. Of course, different technologies offer different coherence time, different fidelity, and all of that impact in the final result of the problem you're trying to solve, right? So that's the way that I see here.
Cool. Another question from here is, how do you balance research, hands-on problem solving, and teaching in your role at IonQ?
How do I handle? How do I balance? What can you repeat? Sorry, I missed you. Oh.
Okay, sorry. How do you balance, so do you work with your research, your problem solving, and your teaching in your IonQ?
IonQ, yeah, that's a great question. Currently, I'm not doing teaching. I have done teaching. I've done lecturing. at universities, educational centers. Currently, I'm full-time at IonQ, and I work at the team that basically is a technical team that talks to the clients, different clients from different industries. We have the technical know-how, we have the technical knowledge, but we also have the team that does the research at IonQ. You know, they're doing like 100% of their time is related to the research because they're creating new algorithms, they're testing new frontier applications. So that's my role at the company. So it's so I don't need to balance with respect to the lecturing because that's not what I'm doing currently. At some point, yes, maybe I come back to that.
Okay, cool. Another question is, what opportunities do you see for Mexican banks and companies to adopt quantum computing early?
Yeah, who adopt quantum computer, right? Yeah, I see as the same way that I see as a new wave. If you think about like AI, right? If you go back in time, like maybe 10 years, it's funny because just to give an example, my first job, really, my second job actually, it was in a credit startup in Brazil. They were doing like mobile payment. And at the time, no one was talking about AI, but we were already using another startup company to model like credit risk using AI. So no one was talking about, right? 2006. And now it's like AI is everywhere, right? So those who made the decision of make the transition and benefit with respect to your ability to better serve your clients, they made the right decision. Those who haven't made the decision, or they might have lagged with respect to their competitors. So I see these as as a similar situation, right? The banks, the insurance companies, right? The exchanges, the credit card companies, the ones who decide to make the movement, they will be better equipped to get the benefits that quant will provide. So I see as a strategic move for the industry, for the companies, right? You don't want to lose that. And as I was saying in the beginning, the very first slide, why now? It's gonna take like 2 years if you decide, okay, let's do quantum. 2 years from now on, until you start really, having your team prepared, like people knowledgeable, and choosing the right problems to attack. Not all problems will be solved by quantum computing, but at least during that preparation, that planning, you're gonna choose the ones that are really worth investing time and resources in quantum. So I really, to summarize, I really think this is a strategic move from the companies from that industry.
Okay, the next question is, are there any financial challenges in Latin America where quantum computing could provide a competitive advantage?
Yeah, I would say that the problems, they are universal in terms of like the region, the demographics. Latin America has its own challenges, that's for sure. But for example, if I look at some countries in Latin America are very focused on, let's say, mining, right? And mining is one of the potential application, right? That can benefit from the quantum computing, not only quantum computing but also quantum sensing, right? But if I look at the financial applications, I don't think that there will be specific problems to Latin America players that could be tackled. I can mention, for example, I'm not sure if you ever heard about the PIX platform that was created by the central bank in Brazil. That's nowadays, I think, is the fourth biggest payment network in the world. It's only behind Visa, MasterCard, and it's huge. So basically, pretty much everyone in Brazil has access to this payment platform. So which is really easy. You use your phone, your number, right? You have a key, and you can make like a transfer of any amount. So that brings like a potentially payment platform with over 200 million people who's already like accessing and using on a daily basis. So you might be thinking, look, how can I monitor this, like to avoid fraudulent transactions, to avoid criminal activity when doing the payments. So all of that, it's very specific to certain areas in Latin America, and I'm talking here as a Brazilian, so I do see these as a big potential opportunity. But the banks are just the banks, they face the same type of problem that banks anywhere else face. Maybe the scale is a little bit different, right, as compared to the United States. I'm based in the United States, working for IonQ. So, but the problems there are really universal.
Cool. The next question is, how can universities in Mexico partner with companies like IonQ to build local quantum expertise or experience?
That's a great question. That's a great question. Yeah, so we're open to to discuss partnerships and help to train, help to create the culture, help to make the people able to understand quantum, and also to talk with the clients, with their potential clients. We're open to doing this. There are engagements in other regions in which the client really use the quantum computer. So we create the quantum computer, we ship, we deploy at the client site, and the client can also use that computer to give us access to the local market. So we can also work that way. So I'd say we're open for those partnerships. Feel free, for those who are interested, feel free to send me an email, and I'm happy to make the connection, the introductions. And in the past, I have worked quite a lot with Mexican companies during the last 11 years at my previous company. So I'm glad to help there if needed be.
Okay, thank you for that. And the last question is, how can students in Mexico get involved with real quantum finance projects without the access to extensive hardware, quantum hardware?
Yeah. For those, as you might recall from one of the first slides, the two ways that you could have access to the quantum computers. Number one, you can access directly through IonQ's API. So you can basically log into. You can have your API key, use your Python code, right? Regardless of the language that you might be using, regardless of the SDK you might be using, use IonQ's API key, and that allows you to have access to both the simulators. So we give free access to the simulators, and then there's a fee-based access to the real quantum computers. right? So that's one way of accessing the quantum computers. The second way is through the cloud platforms, Google, Azure, from Microsoft and AWS. We can, their clients can also have access to quantum resource through those platforms. That's the second way. And the third way is when the client decides to have its own quantum computer deployed on site, right? And that's where we actually fabricate, we manufacture, not fabricate, we manufacture the quantum computer, and we're able to deliver to the client site. Those are the three ways. I guess that for your question, you would be looking at the first two options. Number one, accessing directly through IonQ's API, and number two, through the cloud platform.
Thank you very much, Augusto, for answering all those questions and sharing your results with us today. We hope to have you in another occasion. It's been a real pleasure to having you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for everyone for, for sticking with us till now. Have a great end of the day, everyone. Gracias. Buenas tardes. Bye bye. Feliz noche.
And thank you so much for joining us today. We hope these conferences are very useful and beneficial for your professional career. Tomorrow, we look forward to seeing you for a special session from our sponsor NVIDIA, featuring Mark Wolf at 8 a.m. Chicago time. Following this season, our hackathon will be begin. Thank you so much again, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Bye.